research a bit and then start from there. And I might have some question about your understanding and the knowledge or experience towards
Okay.
museum tour. So at first, I start my research question about a museum as like how does a museum store help museum fulfill its mission? And later I found out like the museum itself have mission towards educational and also like collect, preserve art from the museum. But the museum store have the mission help the museum to fulfill its mission, but also it's have the financial objectives like to help the museum to operate and function well. So later I want to change my topic. This is something I conflict with my advisor is like my question changing to like how museum store help museum to balance their educational objectives and the financial objectives because the museum have to operate, they have to get the source of to get the financial source because after reading several articles I found out like the federal funding for museum have been cut in the past 30 years I think. So museum store have to the admission tickets is also like a source of support, but the other part have to come from the other like resources.
Yeah, and I think as you delve deeper and talk to more people who come from different institutions, you're going to find that they have very unique circumstances, right? So I can tell you the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as an example, receives very little federal funding, but they do receive city funding and some New York State funding, but largely New York City funding. Other institutions might be more dependent upon federal funding or more on their revenue or what have you. So I think that could be a little unique, but I think in general there's probably less funding, from all sources. And so, yes, museums are always anxious to try and grow their revenue.
Yeah, and my research is maybe I want to like because different museums have different situations. So my research is want to like at least interview like 3 museums to see how they encounter this situation and how do they balance.
And when you say museums, you're focused on art museums?
Yes, art museums.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm interested in the museums in art museum in New York, like Rubin House, Rubin Art Museum, and the New Gallery. It's totally different type of museum.
Right, and it might be interesting if you were from the Whitney, since they've gone through such a dramatic change with a new location and all.
Oh yes.
So that might be an interesting one. And they're someone who I know has always been challenged on generating, let's say, bookshop revenue, but it might be doing better for them downtown. I'm not sure. So they might be interesting.
So after my research, I found out like the Met have several locations for the Met.
Less than we used to. Less than, I say we, I'm not there anymore, but less than there used to be. There used to be 23 stores outside of the museum itself.
Yeah.
And then multiple spots within the museum.
Yeah, and they have museum store all around the world, I found out.
Yeah, we have, so we don't own those stores. They're a licensing arrangement, but yes, there's stores in Thailand and in Australia and in Mexico. And there used to be in other countries too, not so much anymore, but Australia being the biggest one.
Do you want to talk more about the operation of the museum store in Met and like how do they, for example, how do they generate revenue or how do they fulfill the museum's mission?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, so an interesting thing, it's always, museums typically not for profit, right? And so the idea of running a retail business is, it's, even though they've been doing it for a long time, it's always very awkward.
Yes.
For a museum because they're trying to find the balance between generating revenue but still being true to the museum mission.
Yes.
Part one. And part two, and the Met was very much on this, being really cautious about not doing anything that would disrupt the not-for-profit status that the museum
Yes.
benefits from. So it's always a little bit of a conflict in the organization.
Yes.
Not that retail is in conflict with the rest of the museum necessarily, although that happens sometimes, but that they're just not sure. They're not always comfortable with it.
Yes.
So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, I'm happy that, as you get to whatever questions, delve deeper into any parts of that.
Yes, because I read several articles of them from the Museum Store Association. Have you heard of that?
MSA, yeah.
Yeah, and they said like running this situation is like running a for-profit retail department in non-for-profit museums. Like there's some conflict between the educational stuff and
Yeah, and there's ways. There's ways different museums try to deal with that. So at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a couple of the ways is this. There tends to be a curatorial panel that tends to have some, depending on the time and who's in charge, different degrees of input around product. So one, there's always suggestions. Suggestions are fine, they can be ignored. Two, at different points in time, there's been the ability of the curator to comment on the items that are being sold in the shop. They're typically based upon something in the collection or the collection of another museum, if not ours. And they might say, oh, that coloring's not right, that whatever's not right. So they're trying to keep the item somewhat true to the original. It's not always necessarily a duplication, but it's at least normally derivative or based on it. But then additionally, when we do certain things like sell stuff in the catalog, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the legal and curatorial panel would have to approve every item that's going to be in the catalog.
oh, so
To say that is, it's being presented in a way that is true to the object and therefore allows it to be educational, right? And so, what we would say, everyone likes to have mission statements, right? So, and there might be a new one now in the last 6 months, I don't know, but in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, our mission statement was very much about to foster education and appreciation, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so,
I see
so
that.
we use the word appreciation, and then we could say, this item is representative of this style of art, or is representative of this individual object, even though it might not just be a direct educational publication or print reproduction or whatever else. But that is always, we wouldn't, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, we wouldn't just sell a deck of playing cards because kids might want to buy it. It would have to have images on it that we think are, and so, it's not profit at any cost, it's profit in a way that is consistent with the mission of the museum,
oh yeah.
is the goal.
So I have a question, like for the museum, do they have like in-house designer for the products, or you have buyers to do that?
So there used to be, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a team of in-house designers and buyers. And we would typically have gone and sourced whatever we designed to be manufactured, maybe in China, maybe in Turkey, depending on what the object is. We'd go to different countries that have more expertise or cost advantages. About a year and a half ago, there was significant layoffs in the retail operation, and most of those people who were designers, most were let go. And so they're rebuilding to some degree now, and it seems that it's more about buying and less about designing.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean art's designing but using external resources to do it.
Wow, that's an interesting point.
And that was largely a cost-saving move. So one of the things that I think happens as it relates to retail, at least at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, is there's these ambitious hopes of all the profit that's going to generate. And so there's frequently significant disappointment
Wow.
that's not generating the level of profit that they had hoped for. And I can tell you, I was at the museum for 11 years, and in those 11 years, there were 4 different heads of the business.
Wow. Wow.
So that's a lot of
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
And with each of those different heads of the business, there was different focuses. So when we talk, when I answer your questions, I'll let you know what I think has been a consistent theme through different leaderships, and what has been maybe or most successful or whatever it might be. But I'll let you know, because they didn't all have the same focus. So when I first went there, the person was focused on opening a lot of stores across the country. We had 23 stores. There was one at the Shortdale Mall, which is just up the road. Multiple other stores. Most of those stores weren't really making money, and she left, and we started closing those stores. Then the next person came in who had come from LL Bean, and we started pushing the catalog a lot more and the website a lot more, and de-emphasizing the stores. Then the next boss came in from the British Museum, and she wanted to emphasize what we do in the museum itself more than anything else. And so, again, a different emphasis, and we cut the catalog production. So at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, it's been quite abrupt changes in focus just over a period of 11 years.
Wow, it's a lot. And also, I have some question about so do the department operate cooperate with the curatorial department more, or education department?
So the word cooperate isn't necessarily always the correct word, because cooperate means working
together
in unison, right?
Yeah.
In some sort of sense. But I would say that as it relates to the creation of products, there's been varying degrees of curatorial involvement, but there's always been some degree of curatorial involvement, not education department involvement. When it would come to how we present the products, especially in the catalog, there would be frequently more educational department involvement and less curatorial involvement.
Oh, okay.
So at different points in the process, different degrees.
Okay, so because there's some product it's mission driven, and some products it's market driven, I think. So market driven, do every product sell in the museum store have to be mission driven, or
I would say sort of, but you get into a question of who decides if it's mission driven.
Yeah, yeah.
And so saying that this has a pattern based upon a floral design on a silk shawl, when there's flower paintings in the collection, you can say, is that good enough?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's good enough. Or other times you might say, this is an exact, almost reproduction of some of the flowers from a Van Gogh painting that are enlarged to make this beautiful scarf, or a Tiffany lamp to make this scarf, or whatever. So how accurate it is to a specific piece or a specific style, that's changed over time. And that hasn't always been consistent about what the expectations or requirements are. So, and I think what you would find as you interview a more broad sampling is that different institutions at different times have different standards for what is mission driven.
Oh, yes.
I think is what you will find. Because I can tell you, even at the Met in 11 years, there were different expectations.
So, is it depends on the curatorial department, or
it more depends. So somewhat. So different curatorial departments. Let's say this is the standard. Let's say the standard is a curator has to sign off on an item. May not be the standard today, but at times that has been the standard. Some curatorial departments are very open to interpretations and more flexibility, and other curatorial departments are much more rigid. And that's largely the byproduct of the personality of the head of that department. So not necessarily consistent, but the tone largely frequently gets set by the leadership of the museum itself. And so if the head of the museum says to the whole curatorial world, we need to be more open and grant more flexibility to the retail business so that they can help generate more revenue, so that we have more funds, so that we don't have to take the reductions in staff that we don't want to take. They set a tone. And at the same time, the president or director of the museum might say to the retail group, don't be untrue to the mission, but be more aggressive, right? Other times, an organization might take a much more conservative stance. Traditionally, the Met was one of the more conservative organizations around this, but I think that's probably evolving.
So how do you see this source of financial income as important as the other source of income in the museum?
So again, with different institutions, there's going to be different dependencies.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot in the papers these days about the Met and its financial problems.
Yes.
Right. And I'm one of the victims of that. In that, right, the new president came in and he let go the museum CFO, the head of design, the chief digital officer, the chief marketing officer, the head of retail business, who was my boss, and me. Right. And said we're gonna. And didn't announce it this way, but fundamentally the museum made a decision to go with a smaller, less experienced team to cut cost.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
But having said that, and then they did a voluntary retirement program, then they did layoffs, and now the director of the museum is leaving, right? And so a lot of change happening there. Having said that, the Metropolitan Museum of Art has $3 billion in its investment portfolio. And so it has a lot of luxury that comes with that. So even though they're trying to get their budget in balance, the truth of the matter is they have cushion.
Yeah.
There are other institutions who don't have $3 million or even $1 billion or even $100 million that are much more dependent upon the revenue streams, right? Be it door admission, the admissions, right? Be it restaurants, be it retail, be it parking garage, be it whatever else. The Met, it is certainly part of, along with city funds and all those other pieces, and concert revenue, because they do shows and whatever there, and membership and all those sorts of other things. It is a component of that, but even though it's the biggest of the retail businesses of the museums in the city, it's probably one of the organizations that's least dependent upon it.
Yeah, I found I look at the 990 form. Because we have to go through that form, and I look at the Rubin Museum and the other museum. I think that is a huge amount of.
Right. If you look at the portion of the revenue, well, and of course they don't. When you look at the 990, you see retail and other auxiliary revenue together.
Yes.
You don't see it separated out, and you see it just on a net number as they report it there. They don't report it on a gross basis. So elsewhere in there, they do show the gross revenue also, but it's, the net number that you're seeing there is garage, restaurant, and retail together.
Yes.
So, you don't get a complete clear picture of it, but yes, as a percentage of the total operating income, it's a very small piece.
Yes. And, look at my question, so right now there's some scholars writing papers about museum right now also function as a tourist attraction. Do you consider a bad thing or good thing?
See, as a guy from the retail side, I think it's a good thing, right? So this is not me talking as a retailer necessarily, but just as an individual.
Yeah.
I worked for Macy's for 13 and a half years before I went to the museum. I didn't study art. I didn't have a master's in art education or anything related to art. I've been to multiple museums. I enjoy them, and I'm completely uneducated about them. I would know an artist that most of the world would know the name, but if you told me an artist that a lot of people don't know, I wouldn't know who you were talking about. But doesn't mean I can't enjoy it. And I think if you look at that mission statement of the typical museum, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, around, art preservation and appreciation and education, and they all use different words, but they tend to focus on those three things, I think.
Yes.
I think exposing a broader audience to art and hopefully fostering an appreciation of a broader audience is a good thing.
Yeah.
And And so the reality is the Metropolitan Museum of Art is a tourist attraction in New York City. And people go to the Empire State Building, they go to the 9/11 Memorial, they go to Macy's,
Yes.
they go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, they maybe go to a show on Broadway, and whether they're coming from China, which a lot of people come from China to visit, or whether they're coming from California, a lot of people come across the U.S., or whether they're coming from New Jersey and they're coming in for the day.
Yeah.
I think having the museum as a destination and not being just for those who are really serious about their art is a good thing. And I think when you are a tourist destination, the tourist has certain expectations. They expect that there's bathrooms to use.
Yes.
They expect that there's a place to grab a bite to eat, and they expect that there's a gift shop that they could buy something to remember the day from.
Yes.
And I think that being a retail in a museum, hopefully is providing revenue to the museum, is hopefully providing opportunities to broaden the educational mission of the museum by sending people home with books that will teach them more and all that sort of stuff. But is also meeting the expectations of a visitor. Just right. If they went in there and they couldn't eat or shop or whatever, and they were only looking at art, probably a lot of people would spend a lot less of their day there. And the thing with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, because it's so big, is it does great on rainy days. Why? Because you can go and spend the whole day there, right? It's not like I'll spend an hour here and then go to the next place. You can spend the whole day there. But you have to have the services that the visitor expects.
Yes.
And I think people expect to be able to shop.
Yes, because I also read some research paper on this, and they say some scholars, they think museum right now is also function as a tourist attraction, and people go there with expectation of spending a whole day there, and they divide their time, how much time in the gallery, some time in the eating, some time in the shopping, and they will spend certain amount of time in shopping. So some scholars think the museum store also help to improve the visiting experience.
Yeah, I think so. And listen, different visitors are going to have different ideas. Some visitors literally just go to the museum, take a picture in front of the museum, check, I was there, right?
Yeah.
Right? And some people want to have a more immersive experience for a day or for some number of hours.
Or buy some souvenirs or take home to...
Take something home, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of us just take something home by taking a picture, but yes, certainly.
And my question is, do museums see the museum store as important as me as some student research on this? So I think museum store is very important, and people working in a museum store absolutely think museum is important. So how about the other part of the museum? Do museum directors see museum store as important as?
There's only so many museum directors, so I think that different ones of them would have different points of view about it. I would say that Tom Campbell, the current director, he certainly thought it was important. He specifically hired someone who he thought would help elevate that experience. She ended up leaving. He's going to be leaving, but clearly, I think he thought it was important, and I'm sure there are many other directors. I think when you look across museum senior management and curators and head or senior curators, I think you'll find a variety of answers. I think some think it is, and I think some think it's. I think some of them probably think it's a cheapening of the experience, right?
Yeah, yes.
Commercializing what they think is precious, and some of them probably think that people have done it badly, and so they probably have some reasons to be concerned, and some of them maybe just would always think it's bad.
Yeah, because I have read some other scholars, they have written paper about the museum store selling stuff that looks cheap and does not necessarily help museum to fulfill its mission. It's only income or revenue.
Yeah,
driven.
Listen, at the pure, if you really wanted to look at it in a very pure way and say it has to be really true, 100% true, truly educational, truly whatever, then you would probably only sell books and posters.
Yeah, books and a catalog.
Right.
Catalog books.
Right? Posters, featured artworks, postcards, and books. Right?
Yes.
The exhibition catalogs and other scholarly publications. And it's interesting. I mean, I have a lot of the books that I've collected over the years, and I love my art books. And if you were to look at an art book from 20 years ago, you'd see a much higher ratio of words to pictures. And more frequently, the pictures were in black and white, even if they were of a color work. And if you look at them now, it's a much higher ratio of pictures to words, and they're in full, detailed, rich color and sharp detail, right? So even in a book, you can see sort of, they've gone more from a true, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way, because I think even the current books are scholarly.
Yes.
I think they're accurate, but they're less dry. They're much more. They're recognizing that they're a blend of a scholarly book and a coffee table book, right? Whereas in the past it was pure scholarly work and detailed, many page essays about some minute detail or whatever. So there's an evolution there.
Yes. So, from your experience, what kind of product do you think that is best sell in the museum?
Well, I mean, certainly when there's a big exhibition and a great book, the book is a game changer. It really defines it. So if you go back to when it was the Alexander McQueen exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that book sold huge numbers. But I forget what we sold.
I even buy two of them.
It's a great book, right? Move it and watch the cover change, right? But that book sold tons. Certain other exhibitions, books don't sell as many. So when a book really performs, there's nothing that does more than the book. But we certainly there are other categories that are big. So books is a great category. Jewelry is a great category, largely because of the price points. Right, so you don't have to sell as many units to do a lot of dollars.
Yes.
And we tend to do, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, very good in textiles. So you see the very big presentation of shawls that have designs on them. And those tend to be the biggest categories there.
So the books, the books is published by
a high percentage of them. So when we do an exhibition catalog, nearly all of those are published by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sometimes when a show travels and does more than one museum, it may not be our book, but most of the time it's our book. But then there's other books that we also publish that are just about the permanent collection or art in general. And there's a lot of books we sell that are from other authors outside the museum.
Yeah, I noticed that there's buyers, and there's book buyer, and
there's a book buyer,
yeah. So they buy books from other published house and
a combination. Like some of them again are very beautiful picture-driven books. Like certainly the Louvre book does very well, and the Vatican book. Those are beautiful books. And some of them are very specific on a specific artist. And even when we do an exhibition, we might have an exhibition catalog, but we might have 20 other books around that artist or that art category. Some of them published by our curators and some of them published by other people.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And I think we have covered a lot of these questions. So do Metropolitan Museum, the museum store do like a customer survey during the year or?
From time to time. So certainly we do that as a regular course for our call center, for the catalog, and for the website. As it relates to in the store, the museum itself from time to time does surveys of visitors, and that frequently includes questions about the shopping experience. But it's not something we do on a regular basis.
So it's more focused on the shopping experience rather than like educational.
Well, it might be focused about the whole visitor experience.
Okay.
What did you come to see today? Where did you spend your time? Did you visit a restaurant? Did you visit the gift shop? Did you buy something? Every once in a while, we'll do a survey specific to the retail shopping.
Okay.
We print on the bottom of the receipt, go to this site, answer a question, get a gift, that sort of thing. But we don't do it all the time.
So you don't necessarily focus on the museum store's educational goal, or more focus on the...
We very seldom would ask a question about, did you find... I don't know that we've ever asked a question asking if they found that the museum shopping experience was aligned with its goals, overall goals. Because it's sort of almost a dangerous question to ask, right?
Yeah.
Because you're telling them to question whether it is.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that we've ever asked that sort of question.
Yeah, thank you. And like for this, we see like museum store like MoMA. They have their design shop, and some people are driven to the MoMA because of the museum store. So, but I think MAD is some kind of lack of these kind of.
Yeah, I think there's I think MoMA versus the MMA is a very different model for a couple of reasons. One, you can enter their shopping experience without even going into the museum.
Yeah.
Whereas us, you can do it without having paid admission, but you still have to enter the Great Hall to get into the shop, right?
Yes.
So one, I think just the fact that some people go there potentially just to shop, and I really think there's very few people who go into the Met to shop and not visit. It's not impossible, but I think there's very few, right?
Yes.
But also MoMA as a museum of modern art celebrating design, that gives them a lot more flexibility in what they choose to sell, right? They can sell a blender that they think has a beautiful modern design.
Yes.
We would say, well, does that really connect to any piece in our collection? How would we justify selling this?
Yes.
And we wouldn't sell that blender, right? So there's I think they have a lot more freedom, whether that's good or bad. People could disagree, but a lot more freedom to take to buy and sell stuff that is less connected to the collection.
If like if the MADs have more pressure from generate revenue, does it get the freedom? My question. What do you think?
I would be surprised. I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, and the answer is probably yes. But I think at the Met, the yes is degrees and not a big change in direction, right? So I think this is has a pattern that's representative of this style, but we don't have any pieces in our collection that directly, relate to this piece, this thing you're selling. But it's representative of the style that is, I think you might find degrees of change, but I don't think you would ever see, I'll do an extreme example, I don't think you'll ever walk into the Met and find a blender, right? Because I don't think they'll ever make that level of leap.
Yes.
I think it would just be too much.
And I also see some scholar, they write article about, they suggest like cross-function of the department, like the curatorial department, they might have some knowledge about selling stuff, and the retail department, the staff have more training of the educational purpose, like training their selling staff with interpretation of each object, and they think it's helpful to help the visitor to get more knowledge from the object. Do you see it's important?
Certainly, the retail group would interact with those departments, especially like if you look at the catalog or go online, you'll see sometimes a story of something, right? And so frequently they'll go and try and get some information about the objects or the style or the artist that the work is connected to. But which is not necessarily the same thing as saying we're looking for their expertise about retail, right? Because everyone shops, and therefore everyone thinks they have an idea of what also sells, and the concept of cross-functional support and expertise is a nice one, but everyone tends to be great at giving advice and not always great at taking advice, right?
Yes.
So, but I think when it's done well, I think it should work together, right? What you don't want is people designing an item and trying to sell it, and then the curator would look at it and say, "This is garbage," right? Right? You don't want that. You don't need them to say, "I think it's the best thing you've ever." Right? That would be nice, but you don't need that. But you certainly don't want them to think it's garbage. So what's the right balance? Of involvement is questionable, but it's tricky. Having been on the retail side, it's tricky to get the involvement that you want without getting more involvement than you want. So it's by getting the right balance of sharing knowledge and supporting and helping versus trying to direct.
Yes, I found balance is quite important in this process, because after reading so many articles, I found out, this advice is great, that suggestion is good, but how to balance, I think it's a problem. But they didn't provide answer about how to balance it. But I think museum, operating for so many years, they already have the balance. So how?
I think so, but I think what you also get is you get, like I said, there were 4 different heads of the retail business in my 11 years. Shortly there'll be the 3rd director, right? There was one director forever, Philippe de Montemello, and then you had Tom Campbell, who was really just there for, I guess, 8 years or so, or 8 or 9 years, and now someone else will be coming in. And I think a lot of the tone gets set by either the head of the museum, or the president of the museum, or the head of the retail business. But I think when it's done well, and I'm not sure who does it best, you can have good balance and you can have it evolve over time. But I think a lot of that is dependent upon people having respect and trust in each other.
Yes.
Right? So you have to respect, if you're on the retail side, you're hopefully respecting the work that the curatorial side is doing.
Yeah.
And you would hope that the curatorial side respects the retail side as being good at retail. And from that respect, you hopefully can have a good process where people support each other and help each other and advise each other, and sometimes maybe very gently correct each other.
Yes.
Right? But if people don't respect each other, then it's all going to be taken from the wrong point of view.
Yes.
Right? And I don't think that's unique to retailers, except for the fact that it's probably, I assume as your research and paper takes shape, it'll be one of the key things, right? Most people who do retail do retail. Right? I work for Macy's. They're a retailer. Right? All these stores, whatever they are around us, they're retailers. That is what they do.
Yeah.
And museums are museums. And when
Curators are curators.
Curators are curators. But when you get retail at a museum, it's retail in a place that's not there for the purpose of retail.
Yes.
And so finding the balance of trying to generate revenue, being commercial enough that you can do so, but being respectful of what the primary mission of the organization is a really, really delicate balance.
Yes.
And I think that most people don't do that as well as they would want. And I think, the dream of most museums is we think everything that you sell is the most pure, wonderful, truest to the art, or artist or object or whatever thing that it could be. Mostly books and art on print and maybe some other stuff, but true to the art. And you generate a ton of revenue so that we could buy whatever we want to buy and open our museum all the hours we want it to be open. But, of course, there's only so many books you're going to sell.
Yeah.
You can sell a lot of books, but there's only so many, whatever that number is. There's only so many posters. Less and less people are buying posters, right? There's only so many posters and postcards you're going to sell, right? So if you're going to be successful at retail in a museum, beyond books, you have to sell stuff that is not just an exact reproduction, especially at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We don't have a big jewelry collection. There are jewelry items, but if we want to sell jewelry, it's either going to be based upon other museums' collections also, or it's going to be derivative of things in our collection. It's going to be a picture of a vine in a painting that we're going to turn into a necklace. You know? And so it's going to be derivative, but if it's going to be derivative, it means you have to be a little more open-minded about how pure it is.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see that. Because like, there's scholars writing about like the derivatives. It's like also like a vehicle, because if you sell it, it goes to people's home, it educate people at the same time. But some scholars, they disagree with this. They think it's not. Only like books, catalog, and prints are that.
And listen, I think a museum could very rightfully decide, you know what, we're going to have a bookshop. We don't want to sell this other stuff. And what I would, if someone was coming to me for advice and they had a museum and they wanted to talk about their gift shop, I would tell them, listen, if you want to have low cost and consistent profit with not a lot of variability, right, then open up a bookshop and sell postcards and posters also. Maybe a couple other small things. But if you start to do what the Met does, or certain other, or MoMA, or whatever, right? If you want to create a clientele and have people who shop your catalog and go to your website or visit your outside stores, right? We're at Newark Airport and JFK Airport and whatever else, in Rockefeller Center, and go to those other shops, then you need to create products that are beyond a bookshop, right? Because what's happening in the bookshops? There's less and less of them, right? So you need to be broader. And if you're going to be broader, then that means you're going to have more expense to support the development of those items, which means that when you have bad sales, you might lose money because you have this expense. So it's a greater risk, it's a greater potential reward, but it's also requires being open to not just doing books. But if you want to be, never risk being untrue to your primary mission of the museum, never lose money, just open up a small bookshop in your museum. You won't do bad. I mean, I was at the Met in years when we made $4 million in retail, and I was at the Met in years when we lost $3 million in retail. So when we lost $3 million, we weren't supporting the museum, right? You know. So.
How do they lost so much?
Well, part of it. Well, there's a couple of things. One, that was economic crisis 2008.
Oh yes.
Okay. Two, the organization had been grown, and we had all these stores in these malls that weren't doing well. We ended up closing them. Also, different museums have different arrangements as it relates to the publications. So, at the Met, in 2008, when we sold a book, 50% of the value of what we sold the book for, that went back to a different department. It was booked as a cost of the book, right?
Yes.
Which makes sense. There's a different department, the editorial department, who is publishing the books. They're paying for the proofreaders, they're paying for the printing, they're paying for all that sort of stuff. So instead of 100% of the profit from those books staying in retail, only 50%, right? Because we assigned a cost to the books.
Yes.
Although those books were already paid for by the museum. They were expense, they were whatever. The museum after that made a decision that they're not going to charge the retail department a cost for the books.
Oh.
Well, that changes the profitability of the retail. Now, if you sell $3 million in books, and I'm not talking about books that we buy from other museums or trade sellers, I'm talking about books that are published by the museum itself.
Yes.
If we sell $3 million of them, instead of paying $1.5 million of cost, if we have them for free, that's $1.5 million swing in our profit. There's reasons why that makes sense for a museum to do. Typically, the museum, as part of their education mission, views selling publications about the art and artist as core to that mission. Right? So if the books are free to retail,
Yeah.
then retail has a bigger incentive to sell as many of those books as possible.
Yes.
And therefore, we're advancing the museum mission of education more through
Yes.
selling more books.
Yes.
So that change in accounting, it's just an accounting change, but
Yeah.
that change was a huge difference in the profitability of retail at the museum.
Oh. Does it change like the operation of the?
No,
No.
the only way it changes our operation is if we sell a lot more books. You know, how we ship them. So my job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was was the financial side, but also the operational side. Right. So the warehouse, the logistics, that was part of my team. Certainly, how we're fulfilling people buying a lot of books, it changes how we ship things, how we pick our orders, and all that sort of stuff, or how many books we buy, or all those sorts of things. But it didn't fundamentally change the transaction or the way we operate it in a real meaningful way.
And also, like, there's like online store for the museum store. Do you see it's a source of generate income, or is it just like?
It certainly generates income. How much income you make from your online is in a typical retailer that doesn't have a catalog, it might be very easy to measure.
Yeah.
But because we mail a lot of catalogs, it's easy for us to look at our catalog business and our website business together,
Oh, that's
right? But to look at them separately is tough because a lot of people get the catalog but then order online, right?
Oh.
And so it's a little bit blurry, the profitability, but web is profitable. It's just how profitable.
I didn't. Oh, so there's people like when they see the catalog, they buy stuff. So why do people do that?
My wife does that a lot. I think it's just, right, there's some people who like to see the images, they like to get the print catalog, or getting in the mail is like getting a marketing piece of material. But instead of filling out a form and mailing it in with a check, or calling the call center up and having to talk to someone on the phone, I think a lot more people, especially under the age of 50 probably, are just a lot more comfortable just going online and placing the order.
Oh, so
Now
people
we do analytics where we would say, you ordered this, we know we mailed you a catalog the day before you ordered this online, you probably ordered it online because you got the catalog. So we draw conclusions, but they're just not 100% accurate.
Okay. So do people after they visit the museum they buy stuff online, or do they?
It's hard for us to see that because we don't typically like. So if you came into the museum and we gave you a coupon and then you used it online, we would know it. But if you just happen to visit the museum today and you buy something tomorrow from your home, it's frequently not going to be obvious to us that there was a connection there.
Oh yes, because I see the museum store like physically people go there as somewhat like improve their visiting.
Or we know you might not want to carry something heavy home on the airplane or whatever. So there's certainly people who do that. Or if you shopped in our JFK store on your way back to China, maybe you asked us to ship it back to you. Although that would be very expensive. But maybe you asked us to ship it back to you because you didn't want to have to carry it.
So I noticed the Thailand and some other country they also have the Met store.
Thailand and Australia is probably
Yeah.
what we're seeing.
Do they sell the same thing?
So they're selling things that we're selling in our shop, but not everything we're selling in our shop. And sometimes we let them sell a few things separately from our shop. So if you went to Australia, you would see that they're probably selling some postcards from MoMA or some gift cards from MoMA. And you'll see that they're selling some kids' toys that we're buying through the trade, they're buying through the trade locally. Because for us to buy it, something we're not producing, and ship it to them, and for them to be able to pay us and that we both make money on it is very hard. But most of what you would see in those stores, the clear majority, probably over 90%, is stuff that you would see in the Met store when you walk into the Met store.
So what is the initial purpose of opening these like overseas?
So I think it's not dissimilar from the original purpose of opening up other stores in America too, which is it's a way to extend the reach of the museum right? So you foster a level connection. So for instance, if you shop in our Australia store or Thailand stores, and you have a Metropolitan Museum of Art membership, they will give you a discount.
Oh.
Just like you get a discount if you shop in the museum store itself, right? You get a discount. Well, so now people in Australia and Thailand, they have much higher levels of membership than those countries would typically have if they didn't have stores there, because people become members sometimes because they're getting the discount. But now those people are fostering a relationship with the museum itself. Maybe they visit the museum, maybe they make a donation one day, you know. So I think it's a way to extend the interactions with a broader audience. And again, I think it's core to that mission of educating more broadly, but it's also just a way to try and generate more revenue. I mean, it's both, you know, at the same
Also,
time.
like balance. So the balance is, I think, it's a key.
But I don't think it's the international licensee stores have not been a hugely profitable thing for the museum. They haven't been unprofitable, but they haven't been a hugely profitable thing. I think it sort of is there.
Because I didn't notice there's overseas like museum stores quite often, but after research on the Met, I noticed that there
used to be more. There used to be in France, Austria, a lot more in Mexico with a different partner, in the Philippines. I mean, there used to be in probably Singapore. I mean, it used to be in like 12 different countries, and now it's really just in 3.5, because Australia does a little bit of something, but not really.
Yeah. So what do you think the Met store is doing good than the other, or what is the Met store that's doing good that you think other museum can learn from it? Or
I think what the Met has done, I mean, the Met, and this is well before I was there, the Met really invented the category of museum retail. I mean, it really started there. There was a gentleman by the name of Brad Kelleher, who's passed away now. But you know, he really is the guy who really got museum retail to be more than just selling some postcards in the lobby.
can I take down his name?
Yeah, so it's Brad.
How does that work?
B-R-A-D. The last name is Kelleher, K-E-H. I have to remember, it's Kelleher.
K-E-L-L
E-H-E-R.
E-H-E-R. Okay.
So if you look up online, you'll find stuff about him. You can find some old book about. There's a couple of old books about museum retail in the Met. If you haven't found them, you should look those up.
Yes.
I forget what it's called, but you'll find. Just look up Metropolitan Museum of Art retail history or something like that. You'll find there's one or two books that are relevant.
Is
might be
it
Merchants
published by the Met?
I think one was and one wasn't.
I'll try to
But
find it.
if it comes to me, I'll email you. But I don't remember the names offhand. But you know, he really got it going to be more broad, like starting to do other categories of product. And so one, I think the Met has shown other museums that it doesn't have to be just product on paper. It can be three-dimensional. It can be sculptural reproductions. It can be jewelry. It can be, you know, various other things. It could be textiles. Two, I think the Met has opened the door to how you can interpret a piece into other formats, right? And not just direct reproduction. But I think the cautions of the Met is it's easy to keep changing directions and having unrealistic expectations, and you know, instead of building consistent, contributing profit to the museum, you could have years where you take a loss. You could have years where, you know, you have to let people go, fire people, and years where, you know, you have a lot of product you have to sell off because it didn't sell well. And so I think it showed both the opportunity and I think it also showed the risk.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's probably what the Met has shared with the broader museum world.
Yes. Because Met, I think it's one of the top museums in the world. Like, also have a big museum tour, and because I'm from China, and Chinese like museum art industry is just growing.
It's really, but it's like it's really growing right now, right?
Yeah, but the museum industry, they lack some kind of knowledge, and especially like in recent years, like in past years, have you heard of the Kiefer events? Like issues like there's a big Chinese museum like Central Academy of Fine Art. Their art museum, they're doing exhibition. They try to invite the big name, the Alstom Kiefer. They want to do the show about him, but they do it like improperly, so the whole world know like what they done.
Well, and listen, I mean,
Yeah.
China obviously has the resources to do things in a big way.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of education happening,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I know, like, Museum Directors Association or whatever, like the Met was very involved in trying to help educate museum leaders and directors from around the world.
Yes.
And they do a symposium like I don't know, once or twice a year. And there's always, I think in every one of them there's at least someone from China,
Yeah.
right? And it's an interesting thing because, having been in retail, right, when I worked at Macy's, Lord & Taylor was the enemy, and whatever else. And, and we would compete with each other. And the museums, they call each other sister institutions, right? And they try to help each other. So it is a different model where people do try to help and support each other. And so I think, I gave a talk at one of those museum director symposiums about retail at the museum. My boss couldn't because she had just been fired, but it's I think there's opportunity, but there'll be growing pains, right?
I think it's interesting because at the beginning of my research, I see their museum MSA, and I think, their retail and store actually they're competitor with each other, but they also like have a association to help like knowledge, and they have panels. I think every
they try to. It's much more trying to help each other. So I mean, retail in general has like the National Retail Federation, right? NRF, right? So they have a group that theoretically is out there working for retail in total, but because they're campaigning the government and they're doing and working against the credit card companies or whatever, but they're not trying to help each other do more business. In museum retail, MSA, they're actually trying to help each other to do more, which is which is nice, and right. And I think it works because it's not like you're going to go to the mall and there'll be the Metropolitan Museum of Art retail store and the MoMA retail store and the Boston Fine Arts Museum store, right? There's nowhere other than maybe online where they're directly competing with each other. So there's less direct competition, and therefore I think more willingness to help each other.
So what do you see of the MSA? Do Met have?
So I've never gone to an MSA conference, but the Met was very involved in MSA, and some of the people who used to be at the Met played roles in the leadership at MSA. Someone who used to be at the Met for years, running the wholesale business, and then was on the product side and was involved in MSA. His name is Stephanie Levinson, and she, if you were to able to find her and connect with her, I'm sure she'd be able to tell you a lot more about MSA than I ever could.
Yes, because I'm also interested in the association and also the museums for like operations, so I might want to like connect with her.
So if you try to track her down, her last name is Levinson. It's Levinson. First name Stephanie. But she was at the Met for years, and she's somewhere else now. I think a smaller, not-for-profit, doing something. But she might be able to share a bit.
So, can I also ask the question about like you also talk about how to balance the profit and non-profit in non-profit settings. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge to operate that?
Well,
can you summarize to one big challenge, or there's multiple?
I think if there was a guiding principle, right, it would be maximizing the revenue and profit while remaining true to the mission of the museum. Right? And so, listen, I could sell candy bars and make money, but is that appropriate for me to sell? Is that true to the mission of the museum? Right? And so I think, how do you maximize the profit while staying true to the overall mission of the museum?
So, who is the person to decide not to sell this?
Well, I don't think any one person can decide that, and that's the trick of it, right?
Yes.
So I think the museum director is the person most important to set the tone of that.
Okay.
Maybe to define the parameters of what is true to the museum mission. But I think the individuals on both the retail team and the curatorial team working together have to manage that process.
Oh, so it's the balance. So is there obstacle or challenge, the biggest challenge to work with the curatorial team?
Well, I think the obstacles are that on the curatorial side, it's very much like a university model. You have these people who are effectively like tenured professors, right? And they're protected. And so they have their individual beliefs about what is appropriate or not appropriate. And they're not necessarily consistent across areas of the curatorial side. And so it's hard to manage them to a common perspective about that. And the flip of that is, fundamentally, the museum retail head is going to be it's hard to measure their performance on being true to the museum mission. It's easy to measure their performance on generating profit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I think
So if I'm the curator, I might choose to have the toughest, most narrow definition of what is true to the museum mission. And if I was the retail person, I might naturally have the broadest definition that allows me to generate the most profit. And getting those people together to come to a common set of principles, right, about what is best for the museum between profit and purity of mission, right? Both those things. Getting consensus on what that place is, I think is very, very tricky. Because every individual would define it differently.
Yes.
And even the director could set a tone, but is he going to set exact rules that defines this is, if the coloration is within 10 parameters, it's okay. And if it's not, you'll never have such defined rules. He can only set a tone, or she can only set a tone. So I think finding that place has to happen over time with people working together in the same room. But it's hard for people to make the time to do that also.
Yeah. So is there, you mentioned the curatorial, they have the panel. Does the panel happen frequently? Does it help with this process?
I think there's different processes in different museums and different processes at different points in time at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah.
So most commonly, they're being worked with individually. So most commonly, individually, we're sitting down with a curator from the American Wing and looking at sharing with them 2 products that we want to produce.
Oh. So
most of the time, it's not necessarily a panel.
it's like item by item, is it true?
Normally.
Okay. Wow.
So, and listen, sometimes it might be a meeting, sometimes you might send them a sample or an image or something, and maybe you're just looking for them to say, yeah, that's fine, or maybe you're looking to have a good discussion about, could it be better, right? And so I think there's different goals for those interactions depending on what year we're talking about, and what curatorial department we're talking about, and what museum we're talking about.
But it's all about like communication. So about like special exhibition, do you also have like reproduction I think also have reproduction of the collection. So how does the product like have been designed? Does it design?
So again, it would come from the retail organization, whether it's inside or outside designers. We'd say, and I'm not a product person, right? But the product people would look at this and say, we think this show is going to be predominantly a paper show. We don't think there's going to be opportunity for jewelry and sculpture in this show. And we think this show might have opportunity for sculpture reproduction or some jewelry pieces or art supplies or whatever it might be. And so one, they'll define, the kinds of products they think would logically sell based upon the type of show it is. Then they'll ask the curators to identify typically what they think are the most important pieces in the exhibition. What the public's going to react to, what they're going to be looking for, what'll be featured heavily in the catalog, what'll be on the cover of the catalog, likely. And then they'll come up with design concepts. And, and there's a whole process about that, which I know very little.
Oh, yeah, I got what you mean. So the whole operation of the retailing is managed by the retail department, and who is my question is who is it function well, or does the curatorial department care about does it function well or not, or only the director of the museum?
So again, I think different curatorial departments will have different points of view about that. So some curatorial departments were very enthusiastic about maximizing the revenue related to one of their shows.
Oh, okay.
Many others don't really care about it, or at least it's not that important to them. I mean, this doesn't mean they don't care at all, but it might not be something they think of critical importance. Most of them care greatly about how many of their exhibition catalogs they sell.
Oh.
Right? So if I'm the head writer of this catalog, right, it's my catalog for my show, I love when you sell 1 million books versus selling 100,000 books, right? And so that they care about. And commonly, a shop that performs well related to an exhibition is probably going to also have better performance of the book. So they might care somewhat about how you do overall. But the book, they all care about.
Oh, they care about the book. Okay.
Because that's, how many times do you write a book? And if you write a book and you sell a ton of them, it's something you might feel good about, So I think, but as it relates to the shop performance, again, different curators would care more or less. So some curators might come and say, I think you could do something around this product, not this product, about this item in the exhibition. I think it's going to be something that draws a lot of interest, and if you could build some products around it, I think that would be great. Or they might even ask, can you please have a poster of this?
But there's not their direct interest. They might direct interest in how does their catalog.
Yeah, and especially, when we're leading up to an exhibition opening, they're crazy, right? So this is a show that they probably worked on for 2 to 5 years, and it's finally coming to fruition.
Yeah.
The pieces on loan are coming in. They're setting it up in the exhibition space. They are so engrossed in that important work that they're doing that a lot of them just don't have the time either to be very focused on what we're going to do with the shop.
So how do the museum directors see the most important things about the museum store? What do you think?
The museum directors are typically also most concerned first with the performance of the catalog. They care greatly about that too. Secondly, I would say with the profitability of the shop in total, and a distant third, if at all, would be individual other objects in the collection, in the shop. Most of them don't tend to get most directors don't tend to get very involved in what we're selling in the shop. It's just of the list of things they're doing, it's not going to normally make their point of view. They'll just, how did the book do? What's their total sales in the shop? How's it performing?
I found interesting, the educational like role of the museum can be fulfilled about like selling of the catalog, and the other like the financial objectives can be sell a combination of catalogs and the other objects, and there's a balance between these
Yeah.
things.
No, it's all part of it, but they'll just, I've been to many of the meetings with, the director and the president of the museum with senior staff that they would have a meeting once every week or two, and an update on what attendance was for the week, an update on various other things, and they get to retail, and if there's an exhibition running, how many of the books did we sell? How were our total sales in the shop? What were our total sales across all the shops? Those were, they might be interested if we said, oh, this performed really well, this other item, right? It might be of some interest to them, but far distant third.
Yeah. Thank you so much for these questions.
Certainly.
Yeah, because I might have some silly questions too. Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, listen, if, as this takes shape more, if something comes to mind and you want to just shoot me an email, please do, and be happy to answer other questions if they come up.
Yeah, I might have more questions coming up, but
Yeah, I'm sure as you do more work, more questions will come.
yeah, after reading more books, I might have more questions. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
and your patience. Thank
No,
you.
my pleasure.
Yeah.